In the quiet suburbs of Grand Rapids, Michigan, under the golden glow of a late summer evening in 1994, Emily Harper, then an only child at 7 years old, sat on the creaky wooden dock of Lake Michigan with her father, Daniel, their fishing lines bobbing in the gentle waves, the air thick with the scent of pine and the distant laughter of neighborhood kids riding bikes down the gravel path. Emily's life, at that tender age, was simple but warm. Her mother, Laura, would braid her chestnut hair each morning before school, her soft hands steady as she helped with spelling homework at the kitchen table, her father's baritone voice filling the house with old country tunes as he flipped pancakes on weekends. A family not picture perfect, but stitched together with the quiet kind of love that Emily thought would last forever, her hazel eyes bright with the innocence of a child who felt seen, her small world orbiting around her parents' steady presence. In their modest two-story home with its peeling white paint and a backyard swing Daniel had built just for her. But that fragile peace shattered one humid August night when her Aunt Margaret burst through the front door at 1 a.m., her voice trembling as she told Emily to pack a bag. Laura had gone into labor 2 months early, and something was terribly wrong. The baby, Emily's soon-to-be sister, fighting for life before even taking her first breath. The hospital lights a harsh glare in Emily's memory as she sat in the waiting room, clutching her stuffed bunny, her hazel eyes wide with fear, the sterile smell of antiseptic burning her nose, while hushed whispers about complications and NICU swirled around her like a storm she couldn't understand. When her sister, Chloe, was finally brought home after weeks in the hospital, she was a fragile bundle of blankets and tubes, her tiny cries echoing through the house like a siren, and Emily watched as her parents transformed. Laura became a shadow of her former self, her hands no longer braiding Emily's hair but scrubbing every surface with bleach, her voice sharp with panic at the slightest cough. Daniel retreating into silence, his fishing trips with Emily replaced by endless drives to pediatric specialists for Chloe, the house now a fortress of paranoia, hand sanitizer bottles on every table, the harsh chemical scent a constant reminder of the invisible wall growing between Emily and her family, a wall that made her feel like an outsider in her own home, but her hazel eyes dimming as she stood at the edge of Chloe's crib, forbidden to touch her sister, her small hand hovering in the air, aching for a connection that was already slipping away, the first cracks of a childhood that would soon be defined by absence, by the unspoken message that she, Emily, was somehow less important, less deserving of the love she'd once known. A realization that settled into her bones like the chill of a Michigan winter, heavy and unrelenting, as she sat alone on the backyard swing, the laughter of her past fading into the wind. By the time Emily Harper turned 10 in the spring of 1997, the once warm walls of her family's two-story home in Grand Rapids, Michigan, had become a battleground of unspoken resentment. The air, thick with the lingering scent of bleach and the constant hum of worry that surrounded her younger sister, Chloe, now 3 years old, a fragile child who'd outgrown her early health struggles but had mastered the art of commanding attention, her wide green eyes and soft blonde curls, a stark contrast to Emily's quiet presence, her chestnut hair often left unbrushed, her hazel eyes shadowed with a longing for the love she'd once known. A love now reserved exclusively for Chloe, the golden child who could do no wrong in Laura and Daniel's eyes, their every move dictated by her whims, leaving Emily to fend for herself in a house that felt more like a museum of her sister's needs than a home. Chloe had learned to exploit her early fragility, faking a cough to skip school or claiming a headache to avoid chores, her voice a soft whine as she'd say, "Mommy, I don't feel good," and Laura would drop everything mid-sentence, mid-meal to cradle her, calling the school to excuse her absences, while Emily, who'd spent weeks preparing for the school's spring talent show, stood in her room, her small fingers trembling as she practiced "Somewhere Over the Rainbow" on a second-hand keyboard she'd bought with her allowance, her hazel eyes brimming with hope that her parents might finally notice her, might finally see her worth beyond the shadow of Chloe's endless demands, only to have that hope crushed when Chloe spiked a slight fever 99.2 degrees on the night of the show, Laura and Daniel rushing her to the pediatrician instead of attending, leaving Emily to perform alone under the dim auditorium lights, her voice cracking as she sang to rows of unfamiliar faces, the applause a hollow echo in her chest. A wound deepened 2 weeks later when the entire family, including both sets of grandparents, crowded into the community center to cheer Chloe's off-key rendition of Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star on a plastic recorder, their cheers a dagger in Emily's heart, a reminder of her invisibility, her hazel eyes burning with unshed tears as she sat in the back row, unnoticed, her hands clenched in her lap, the weight of being the lesser child pressing down on her like the humid Michigan air before a storm. At home, Emily's every move was policed. Laura banned her from using her favorite citrus-scented shampoo, claiming Chloe was allergic to the smell, forcing Emily to wash her hair with unscented bar soap that left it dull and tangled, her hazel eyes catching her reflection in the bathroom mirror, a girl she barely recognized, stripped of the small joys that made her feel like herself. While Chloe's room overflowed with toys and pastel decorations, her every whim indulged, her tantrums met with coups and candy, a stark contrast to the cold reprimands Emily received for the slightest misstep, like the time she sneezed at the dinner table and Laura snapped, "Emily, go to your room, we can't risk Chloe getting sick," sending her to Aunt Margaret's for the weekend, where the warmth of Margaret's homemade apple pie and collection of old mystery novels became Emily's only refuge, a sanctuary where she could escape the suffocating reality of her home, her hazel eyes poring over the pages of Agatha Christie, her young mind clinging to the stories as a lifeline, a way to feel seen, even if only by fictional characters, the ache of being unwanted, a constant companion, a shadow that followed her through the halls of her childhood, whispering that she'd never be enough, that her existence was a burden, a truth that carved itself into her heart as she sat alone in her room. But the faint sound of Chloe's laughter echoing from downstairs, a reminder of the love she'd never reclaimed. As the autumn leaves of 2003 painted Grand Rapids, Michigan, in shades of crimson and amber, Emily Harper, now 16, stood at the threshold of her teenage years with a fire in her hazel eyes, a fire fueled by years of being overlooked. Her chestnut hair, pulled back in a tight ponytail as she sat at her desk in her small bedroom, the walls lined with second-hand books on art history and vintage fashion, her sanctuary in a home where Chloe's every whim still dictated the rhythm of the Harper household. The faint sound of Chloe's laughter drifting up the stairs as Laura fussed over her latest fabricated ailment, a supposed allergy to the new fabric softener Emily had used. A claim that led to Laura banning Emily from doing her own laundry, forcing her to hand-wash her clothes in the backyard with a bar of unscented soap, her hands red and raw from the cold Michigan water, a quiet humiliation that only deepened the ache in her chest, the ache of being the invisible daughter, her every achievement drowned out by Chloe's endless demands, her parents' eyes blind to the resilience blooming in their eldest child, a resilience that would become her ticket out of a home that had never truly been hers. Emily threw herself into high school with a determination that bordered on obsession, her desk, a testament to her discipline, color-coded binders, meticulously planned study schedules, and a jar of sharpened pencils, her hazel eyes scanning pages late into the night, the glow of a thrift store lamp casting shadows on her face as she memorized vocabulary for the debate team, her voice finding strength in the arguments she crafted, a skill that made her a standout at regionals. Though Laura and Daniel never showed up to watch her win, too busy driving Chloe to her junior cheerleading tryouts, where she'd faked a sprained ankle to get extra attention from the coach. A performance that earned her a spot on the team and a celebratory dinner at Olive Garden, while Emily ate leftover mac and cheese alone in her room, her debate trophy tucked under her bed, a silent victory in a house that refused to see her shine, her hazel eyes, burning with a mix of pride and pain, the sting of her parents' absence sharper than any defeat. She worked part-time at Daisy's Diner on Division Avenue, a greasy spoon where the owner, Mrs. Clara Bennett, a kind woman with a smoker's rasp, slipped extra tips into Emily's apron, and always remembered her birthday with a slice of cherry pie, a small act of care that meant the world to Emily, whose own parents had forgotten her 15th birthday, too consumed with Chloe's migraine that day, a migraine that mysteriously vanished when Chloe wanted to go to the mall, leaving Emily to celebrate with a candle stuck in a stale muffin, her hazel eyes glistening with unshed tears as Mrs. Bennet sang "Happy Birthday" in the empty diner, the warmth of her voice a lifeline in a sea of neglect, a reminder that someone, somewhere, saw her worth. That same year, Emily took the SATs, her heart pounding as she filled in the bubbles, her hazel eyes darting between the clock and the test booklet, the pressure of her future bearing down on her like the weight of a Michigan snowstorm. And when the results came back a perfect 1,600, a score so rare it placed her in the top 1, she clutched the paper in her trembling hands, her breath catching in her throat, a flicker of hope igniting in her chest as she ran home to tell her parents, only to find Laura helping Chloe with a cheerleading routine in the living room, the music blaring as Chloe twirled, her blonde curls bouncing. And when Emily burst in, her voice shaking with excitement, "Mom, Dad, I got a perfect SAT score." Laura barely looked up. Muttering, "That's nice, honey, but can you keep it down?" Chloe's practicing for her big game, while Daniel nodded absently, his eyes fixed on Chloe, and Chloe herself smirked. "Wow, this perfect. Some of us actually have to work for things," her words a knife that twisted in Emily's gut, the paper crumpling in her hand as she retreated to her room, her hazel eyes brimming with tears, the triumph of her perfect score reduced to a whisper in a house that only ever shouted for Chloe, a moment that solidified her resolve she would escape, she would build a life where she was seen, a life where her worth wasn't measured by her sister's shadow, a life that began with a locked box under her bed, where she hid her acceptance letters from Harvard, Yale, and Stanford, each one a ticket to freedom, each one a secret she guarded with her life, knowing that if Chloe found out, she'd turn even this victory into another reason to demand more, to take more, to leave Emily with nothing, as she always had. In the crisp September air of 2005, Emily Harper, now 18, stood on the sprawling campus of the University of Chicago, her hazel eyes wide with a mix of awe and relief as she dragged a battered suitcase across the cobblestone path to her dorm, the Gothic architecture of the buildings towering above her like a promise of a new beginning, the weight of Grand Rapids, Michigan, and the suffocating shadow of her family finally lifting from her shoulders, her chestnut hair catching the sunlight, as she breathed in the freedom of a life where she was no longer the invisible daughter. Her acceptance to Chicago on a full-ride scholarship, a hard-won escape from the Harper household, where Chloe's endless demands had consumed every ounce of Laura and Daniel's attention, their absence on her move-in day a bitter but unsurprising sting. Laura had texted that morning, "Sorry, honey, Chloe's cheerleading nationals are this weekend. We can't make it," leaving Emily to set up her dorm alone, her hazel eyes glistening with unshed tears as she unpacked her few belongings, a faded photo of her and Aunt Margaret at Lake Michigan, slipping out of a book, a reminder of the only family member who'd ever truly seen her, the $300 Margaret had slipped into her hand before she left. "Your grandma would have been so proud," she'd said, a small lifeline that warmed Emily's heart as she pinned the photo to her bulletin board. Her new roommate, a bubbly girl named Jenna, chattering about the city as Emily forced a smile, her mind still heavy with the memory of her parents' indifference, a wound that throbbed even amidst the promise of a fresh start. College became Emily's sanctuary, a whirlwind of late-night study sessions in the library, instant ramen dinners, and the intoxicating freedom of being seen for her own merits, her hazel eyes lighting up as professors praised her essays on art history, her passion for vintage textiles and design history, a seed planted by Aunt Margaret's old-fashioned magazines, blossoming into a major that felt like her own, a world where Chloe's shadow couldn't reach. Her graduation in 2009 with summa cum laude honors, a moment of triumph she celebrated alone. Laura and Daniel too busy helping Chloe transfer to her fourth college in 3 years, Their absence at her ceremony a final confirmation that she'd never been their priority, her hazel eyes scanning the crowd for faces that would never come. The diploma in her hand, a symbol of her independence, a bridge to a future she'd built with her own hands, a future that began with an entry-level job at Whitmore & Sons, a prestigious auction house in Chicago's Loop, where she started in their estate sales division, cataloging the belongings of wealthy clients who'd passed away. A job that wasn't glamorous, sorting through dusty armoires and logging endless sets of silverware, but paid the bills and ignited a spark in her hazel eyes. A spark that had been dormant since her childhood days, flipping through Margaret's magazines, her fingers brushing against a vintage silk scarf in her first estate sale, its intricate floral pattern whispering stories of the past, a connection to history that felt like coming home, her hazel eyes narrowing as she noticed a small embroidered monogram, a detail others had overlooked, a detail that would change everything. Over the next year, Emily poured herself into her work, her hazel eyes scanning every item with the precision she'd honed in high school, her debate team skills coming alive as she negotiated with appraisers, her knowledge of vintage design growing with every late-night research session. Her tiny studio apartment in Wicker Park, a chaotic haven of books and fabric swatches, the walls pinned with notes on textile authentication, her first big break coming when she identified a scarf in the estate of an elderly heiress as a rare 1922 Hermes piece. Its value underestimated at $50, but sold at auction for $8,500 after Emily's meticulous presentation to her boss, Mr. Edward Langston, a gruff man with a sharp eye who'd initially dismissed her. "It's just a scarf, Harper," but whose skepticism turned to respect when the gavel fell. His nod of approval, a rare moment of validation that lit a fire in Emily's hazel eyes. A fire that burned brighter than any praise she'd never received from her parents. A fire that whispered she was on the cusp of something extraordinary. A path that would lead her far from the pain of her past. A path where she could finally be enough. Not for her family, but for herself, her hazel eyes reflecting a future she'd only dared to dream. A future where she'd rewrite her story, one rare find at a time, the scars of her childhood fading with every step she took into the unknown. By the humid summer of 2012, Emily Harper, now 25, stood at a crossroads in her small Wicker Park apartment in Chicago, her hazel eyes tracing the cluttered walls pinned with textile swatches and authentication notes, the faint hum of the city outside her window, a constant reminder of the life she was building far from the suffocating confines of Grand Rapids, Michigan, her chestnut hair tied back as she pored over a stack of vintage fabric catalogs under the glow of a flickering desk lamp, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and exhilaration. She'd just been handed a chance to change everything. A chance sparked 2 years earlier at Whitmore & Sons auction house, where her discovery of a rare 1922 Hermes scarf had earned her the trust of her boss, Edward Langston, a gruff man whose rare praise had lit a fire in her soul, a fire that had grown into a daring idea when Langston pulled her aside after she'd authenticated a set of 1932 Chanel lace gloves sold for $22,000. His voice low as he said, "Harper, you're wasting your talent here, you should be running your own show." Words that echoed in her mind like a challenge, a dare to step into the unknown, her hazel eyes burning with ambition as she imagined a future where she wasn't just an employee, but a force in the world of vintage design, a world where her worth wasn't measured by her family's indifference, a world she could claim as her own. Emily didn't leap blindly. She spent months preparing, her nights filled with online courses on textile history, her weekends scouring estate sales for overlooked treasures, her savings dwindling as she invested in a magnifying loupe and a UV light for authentication, her hazel eyes narrowing at every stitch and seam, her debate team precision alive in every negotiation with collectors, until one rainy April evening, after authenticating a private client's 1942 Dior shawl that sold for $15,000, she made the decision she'd start her own business, a venture that would either make her or break her. her heart racing as she signed a lease for a tiny office above a noodle shop in Pilsen, the smell of soy sauce seeping through the floorboards, the space barely bigger than her college dorm, its single window rattling in the wind, but it was hers, a symbol of her defiance against the years of being unseen, her hazel eyes reflecting a flicker of pride as she hung a sign that read, Harper Vintage Authentics, a name that carried the weight of her dreams she kept hidden from her family, who still believed she was a low-paid clerk at an antique store. Their Sunday dinner conversations in Grand Rapids, a painful ritual where Laura would sigh, "Emily, when are you going to get a real job?" And Chloe would smirk, "Yeah, sis, stop playing with old rags." Their words a dagger in her heart, yet Emily stayed silent, her hazel eyes masking the truth that she was building an empire, one rare find at a time, an empire that would soon make her a name in Chicago's elite circles, a secret she guarded as fiercely as her independence. The first 6 months were a gauntlet. Emily woke at a.m. to cold sweats, her hazel eyes scanning spreadsheets as loan payments loomed, her office furnished with a thrift store desk and a chair she'd salvaged from an alley, its wobbly legs a metaphor for her fragile start, but her reputation from Whitmore & Sons carried her forward. Her first clients, local antique dealers who trusted her eye for detail, her fees lower than the big firms, but her work unmatched, her hazel eyes catching a faint watermark on a 1,910 seconds lace veil that others had missed, a discovery that earned her $5,000 and a referral to a wealthy collector, a woman who handed Emily a crumbling velvet cape and whispered, "Find out what this is. I don't trust anyone else." A moment that stopped Emily's breath, her hazel eyes wide as she unraveled the cape's history over 3 sleepless nights, identifying it as a lost 1,890 seconds worth piece. Its auction sale of $92,000, a seismic shift that put her name on the map. Her phone buzzing with calls from estate lawyers and private collectors, her hazel eyes gleaming with a mix of disbelief and triumph as she deposited her first 5-figure commission, a sum that dwarfed her parents' annual income, yet she told no one, not Laura, not Daniel, not Chloe, who'd bragged at the last family dinner about her new designer purse from a mall outlet, a purse Emily knew was a knockoff with one glance, her hazel eyes twinkling with the irony of her secret, a secret that grew heavier with every deal she closed, every dollar she earned, every step she took toward a life where she was no longer the girl sent away for sneezing, but a woman who'd turned her pain into power, her hazel eyes fixed on the horizon, a horizon that promised more than her family could ever imagine, a horizon she'd reach alone, with no one to hold her back, no one to dim her light, no one to remind her of the love she'd never had. In the biting chill of February 2015, Emily Harper, now 28, sat in her sleek downtown Chicago office, the skyline glittering through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Harper Vintage Authentics, her hazel eyes scanning a spreadsheet that showed her company's latest triumph, a $1.8 million authentication deal for a private collector's 1,870 seconds French couture gown, a sum that would have left her breathless a few years ago. But now, it was just another milestone in the empire she'd built from a Pilsen noodle shop attic. Her chestnut hair swept into a low bun as she leaned back in her ergonomic chair, the faint hum of her team's chatter filtering through the glass door. A team that had grown to 10 specialists since she'd taken that leap 3 years ago. Her success a secret she guarded like a vault, especially from her family back in Grand Rapids, Michigan, who still saw her as the quiet girl sorting old rags at an antique store. Their Sunday dinners, a ritual Emily endured out of habit, her hazel eyes masking the irony as Laura sighed over Chloe's latest drama, now 21, and floundering in her 3rd attempt at a marketing degree, her blonde curls bouncing as she whined about unfair professors, while Daniel nodded absently, his fork scraping against his plate, the same plate Emily had eaten overcooked pot roast from for years, a plate that held no warmth for her, only memories of being the daughter they'd forgotten, her hazel eyes flickering with a mix of resignation and defiance as she sat through their chatter, knowing she could buy their entire house with one commission check, yet choosing silence, her secret a shield against their indifference, a shield that grew heavier with every dollar she sent them in secret. It had started a year ago, when Aunt Margaret called late one night, her voice trembling as she confessed that Laura and Daniel were drowning in debt: Chloe's private college tuition, her medical expenses for vague ailments, and a second mortgage on their Grand Rapids home, pushing them to the edge of foreclosure, a crisis Emily couldn't ignore. Despite the years of neglect, her hazel eyes clouded with memories of her childhood swing, the one Daniel had built before Chloe's birth stole his attention. So she set up an anonymous monthly transfer of $6,000 to their bank account, routing it through a shell account to avoid detection, her heart twisting as she imagined Laura's relief, never knowing it came from the daughter she dismissed, the daughter who drove a modest Honda to Sunday dinners to hide her wealth, her hazel eyes catching Chloe's new designer sunglasses knockoffs from a strip mall. Though Chloe swore they were Chanel, her lips twitching with a private amusement as she nodded along, her secret growing sweeter with every lie Chloe told, every dollar she spent from Emily's unseen generosity, dollars that funded Chloe's weekend trips to Miami and overpriced lattes, while Laura praised her resourcefulness, oblivious to the truth, a truth Emily held like a card up her sleeve, her hazel eyes glinting with the thrill of it, the thrill of being the invisible hand that kept their world afloat, yet never getting a single thank you, a thrill laced with pain, the pain of knowing her love for them was a one-way street, a street she walked alone, her hazel eyes dimming as she drove back to Chicago after each dinner, the city lights, a beacon of the life she'd built, a life where she was seen, respected, feared even, by collectors who whispered her name in awe. A life that stood in stark contrast to the Grand Rapids dining room, where Chloe's voice drowned out everything else. Her latest Instagram post about living her best life, racking up likes Emily knew were bought with her money, her hazel eyes narrowing as she scrolled through the photos on her phone. A photo of Chloe posing in a vintage dress, another fake, its polyester sheen betraying its origins, her heart aching not for the money, but for the family that had never valued her, a family that took and took without seeing the cost, a cost Emily paid in silence, her hazel eyes fixed on the road ahead, the Chicago skyline, a promise that her worth wasn't tied to their approval, a promise she clung to as she parked her car and stepped into her office. The weight of her secret, both a burden and a badge, a reminder that she'd turned their rejection into her strength, a strength that would carry her through the storm she didn't yet know was coming, a storm that would test everything she'd built, everything she'd become, everything she'd hidden from the family that had never deserved her. On a snowy Thanksgiving morning in 2016, Emily Harper, now 29, stood in the kitchen of her parents' Grand Rapids, Michigan, home, her hazel eyes scanning the chaos of catering trays she'd ordered from a high-end Chicago firm, their silver lids glinting under the fluorescent lights. A spread of rosemary roasted turkey, truffle, mashed potatoes, and cranberry chutney that cost more than her family's monthly mortgage, her chestnut hair pulled into a neat chignon as she adjusted a centerpiece of white roses, her heart a tangled knot of anticipation and dread. She'd taken over the holiday meal to spare Laura the stress of cooking for 25 relatives, a gesture born not of love, but of exhaustion from pretending their dry turkey and lumpy gravy were worth the 3-hour drive from Chicago, exhaustion from the role of the dutiful daughter who'd been sending $6,000 a month to keep their house afloat, her hazel eyes flickering with a quiet resolve as she set out crystal wine glasses, a secret pride in knowing she could afford this extravagance, while Laura fussed over Chloe's latest complaint, a sore throat that hadn't stopped her from downing 2 mimosas before noon, her blonde curls bouncing as she pouted. "Mom, Sarah's catering looks so basic," her words a jab that Emily brushed off, her hazel eyes meeting Laura's with a forced smile, the weight of her secret heavier than ever, a secret that had grown into a $14.2 million empire, her company, Harper Vintage Authentics, now a name whispered in the elite circles of New York and Paris, a secret she'd guarded through years of Sunday dinners where Daniel would mutter, "When are you gonna get a real job, em?" And Chloe would smirk, "Yeah, Sis, your rag shop must be thriving. Their laughter a blade in her heart. Yet she'd stayed silent, her hazel eyes hiding the truth that she could buy their entire neighborhood with one deal. A truth that was about to unravel in the most explosive way imaginable. As the family gathered around the oak dining table, the air thick with the scent of sage and the buzz of small talk, Emily slipped upstairs to her old bedroom unchanged since high school, its faded floral wallpaper a time capsule of her loneliness to check her laptop, a last-minute authentication deal for a $2.3 million 1,860 seconds worth gown in a London auction, demanding her attention, her hazel eyes narrowing at the screen as she typed notes, the glow illuminating her face, unaware that Chloe, tipsy and bored, had followed her, her green eyes glinting with malice as she spotted the open laptop, a chance to expose her pathetic sister, her voice dripping with mockery as she grabbed the device. Let's see what Miss Ragshop's working on during Thanksgiving. Before Emily could stop her, Chloe stormed downstairs, her heels clicking on the hardwood, the laptop raised like a trophy as she burst into the dining room. Everyone, look at Emily's big important job. Her voice a taunt as she flipped the screen toward the stunned relatives, aunts, uncles, cousins frozen mid-bite, their forks hovering over plates of gourmet stuffing, the room falling silent as the screen displayed a balance of $14.2 million, a pending contract for $2.3 million, and Harper Vintage Authentics quarterly profit of $5.6 million. Numbers that hit the air like a thunderclap, Chloe's smirk fading into a gasp, her face paling as she swayed. This can't be real, her voice cracking, the silence deepening as Laura's wine glass slipped from her hand, shattering. On the floor, her face twisting from confusion to fury. Emily, what is this? Her voice a hiss, while Daniel choked on his bourbon, his eyes wide with disbelief, the relatives whispering as Emily stood frozen at the top of the stairs, her hazel eyes locked on the scene, her heart pounding like a drum as years of secrecy unraveled in seconds, her voice steady despite the storm in her chest. It's real. Mom, I own Harper Vintage Authentics, one of the top authentication firms in the country, her words slicing through the chaos. A confession that turned the room upside down, Laura's face reddening as she screamed, "You're sitting on millions and let us struggle?" Her voice shrill, ignoring the $6,000 monthly transfers Emily had sent for years. Chloe sobbing, "How could you hide this from me? I deserve to know." Her tears as fake as the vintage scarf around her neck. Daniel slamming his fist on the table, "You're selfish, Emily, we're your family." Their accusations a tidal wave that crashed over her, her hazel eyes blazing with the fire she'd buried for decades. A fire that refused to be drowned out. A fire that would burn through every lie, every slight, every moment she'd been made to feel less, her voice rising as she stepped forward. "Struggle? I've been sending you thousands every month while you praise Chloe for her hustle. I built this alone. Despite you." Her words a lightning bolt, the room erupting in shouts, the catering staff retreating to the kitchen, the roses trembling in their vase, Emily's hazel eyes unyielding, the truth laid bare. A truth that would shatter the fragile ties of a family that had never deserved her. A truth that would set her free or destroy everything she'd fought for, her heart racing as she faced the storm. No longer the girl who'd sat alone on the swing, but a woman ready to claim her story no matter the cost. In the aftermath of the Thanksgiving explosion of 2016, Emily Harper, now 29, drove back to Chicago through a Michigan snowstorm, her hazel eyes fixed on the road as wipers battled the flakes, her heart a battlefield of rage and relief. The dining room showdown had shattered the fragile facade of her family, her $14.2 million secret laid bare when Chloe exposed her laptop screen, the numbers $2.3 million contracts, $5.6 million quarterly profit igniting a firestorm of greed and betrayal. Laura's scream, "You let us struggle," still ringing in her ears, despite the $6,000 monthly transfers Emily had sent for years. Chloe's crocodile tears, "I deserve a share," a mockery of the sisterhood they'd never had. Daniel's fist on the table, selfish, a final nail in the coffin of her hope for their love. her hazel eyes burning with the weight of their accusations as she'd stormed out. Clutching her laptop and a vintage Balenciaga tote Laura had once called cute but cheap, the irony bitter as the wind that whipped her chestnut hair across her face, her phone buzzing relentlessly in the passenger seat, a flood of texts and missed calls, 63 from Laura, 42 from Chloe, 19 from Daniel, each one a dagger. Each one proof that the family she'd propped up with her invisible generosity had turned on her the moment her wealth was revealed, her hazel eyes glistening with unshed tears as she gripped the wheel, the Chicago skyline emerging through the snow like a beacon of the life she'd built alone, a life now threatened by the chaos she'd left behind, a chaos that would test every ounce of her strength, every brick of the empire she'd forged from the ashes of her childhood pain. By the time she reached her Wicker Park apartment, her phone was a war zone. Laura's messages spiraling from fury, "How dare you humiliate us?" to manipulation, "We're family, Emily. We need to talk." Chloe's texts, a venomous mix of sobs, "You've ruined my life," and demands, "I need $3 million to start over." Daniel's voicemails gruff with guilt trips, "We raised you, and this is how you repay us." Her hazel eyes narrowing as she scrolled. The audacity of their entitlement, a slap after years of neglect, a neglect that echoed in Chloe's Instagram story, a tear-streaked selfie captioned, "Betrayed by my own sister, who hid millions while we suffered," the post racking up hundreds of likes, comments from distant cousins and high school acquaintances piling on. Ungrateful, selfish rich girl, a digital mob Emily hadn't seen coming, her hazel eyes widening in disbelief, her chest tightening as she realized the storm wasn't just in Grand Rapids, but spreading online. Her name dragged through the mud by a sister who'd spent her money on fake Gucci bags and Miami brunches, a sister who'd never once said thank you, a sister who now painted her as the villain, her hazel eyes flashing with the resolve that had carried her through sats and auction houses. She wouldn't let them win. Not this time. Not after everything she'd sacrificed to rise above their dismissal. The harassment escalated when Laura, Daniel, and Chloe showed up at Harper Vintage Authentics downtown office on Monday morning, their faces a mask of righteous indignation as they sat in the sleek reception area, Chloe clutching a knockoff Prada purse, Laura demanding to see Miss Millionaire, Daniel muttering about family duty. Their voices loud enough to unsettle Emily's team, her hazel eyes meeting her assistant, Lena's worried glance as she stepped into the lobby, her voice calm but steel-edged. "What do you want?" Laura's reply a rehearsed tirade, "We've decided you owe us trust funds, $5 million each. It's only fair," Chloe interrupting. "I need it for my influencer career. You owe me for hiding this." Daniel adding, "And we're retiring soon. A lake house would be nice." Their demands so absurd Emily almost laughed, her hazel eyes blazing as she countered, "Oh, you. For what? Ignoring my perfect sat? Missing my graduation? Sending me to Margaret's for sneezing?" Her words a whip that silenced them, Laura's face purpling, Chloe's tears starting again. "Fake as ever," Daniel stammering. "We gave you everything." A lie so bold Emily's composure snapped, her voice rising, "I gave myself everything, and I've given you $6,000 a month for years you spent praising Chloe while I ate your scraps." Her hazel eyes locking on theirs, unyielding, as she pulled out her phone and canceled the monthly transfers with a few taps, the finality of it a weight lifting from her chest, Laura gasping as if struck, Chloe shrieking, "You can't do this." But Emily was done, her voice cold, "Get out, or I call security," their refusal forcing her to follow through, her hazel eyes steady as guards escorted them out, Laura yelling, "You're no daughter of mine." A wound that should have hurt but didn't, not anymore. Not when she'd built a life where their rejection was powerless, her hazel eyes turning to Lena, who whispered, "You okay, boss?" A question that grounded her, a reminder that she wasn't alone, not here, not in the world she'd created, a world where her worth wasn't defined by a family that had chosen greed over love, a world she'd defend with every fiber of her being, her hazel eyes gleaming with a fire that no storm could extinguish, a fire that promised she'd never bow to their demands, never again be the girl they'd made invisible, never again let their shadows dim her light. 6 months after the Thanksgiving inferno of 2016, Emily Harper, now 30, stood on the balcony of her new Lakeview penthouse in Chicago, the spring breeze carrying the scent of blooming lilacs as her hazel eyes traced the shimmering expanse of Lake Michigan, the city skyline a testament to the life she'd reclaimed, her chestnut hair loose and catching the sunlight, a stark contrast to the weight of the Grand Rapids chaos she'd left behind. The dining room betrayal, Chloe's laptop reveal of her $14.2 million empire, Laura's screams, Daniel's accusations, and the office showdown where she'd canceled their $6,000 monthly lifeline, a decision that severed the last thread of a family that had never seen her worth, her hazel eyes no longer clouded by their rejection, but clear with the hard-won peace, a peace that had come at the cost of her old life, a price she'd paid willingly to become the woman she was now, unapologetic, unstoppable, free. Her heart lighter than it had been since the days she'd sat on Aunt Margaret's porch, flipping through vintage fashion magazines, dreaming of a world where she wasn't invisible, a world she'd built brick by brick, deal by deal. Her company, Harper Vintage Authentics, now a titan in the authentication world, its name synonymous with precision and discretion, her hazel eyes gleaming with quiet pride as she sipped her coffee, the penthouse's minimalist decor, white walls, oak floors, a single vintage Dior scarf framed above the fireplace, a reflection of her journey, a journey that had led her here, to a place where the scars of her childhood were no longer wounds, but badges. Badges of a strength her family would never understand, a strength that had carried her through the storm and into the light. The fallout in Grand Rapids had been relentless. Chloe's Instagram campaign escalated after the office eviction, her post painting Emily as a heartless millionaire who'd abandoned her family, racking up thousands of likes from strangers who didn't know Emily had funded Chloe's influencer lifestyle, her hazel eyes narrowing as she'd blocked her sister's account, the digital noise fading with a single tap. Laura and Daniel's final letter arriving a month later, a typed page dripping with sanctimonious venom. "We don't need your money. We pray for your soul." Letter Emily burned in her fireplace, the ashes a symbolic end to their hold on her, her hazel eyes watching the flames with a calm she hadn't known was possible, their silence since then a gift, a confirmation they'd finally stopped chasing her wealth, a wealth that had grown despite their chaos. Her latest deal, a $3.7 million authentication for a private Parisian collector, cementing her reputation, her team at Harper Vintage Authentics expanding to new offices in London, her hazel eyes scanning the city below, no longer searching for approval, but savoring the freedom of being enough, just as she was, a freedom that tasted sweeter than any apology her family would never offer. Chloe, predictably, had tried to ride Emily's coattails, launching a vintage authentication Instagram page that Emily discovered by chance, her hazel eyes twinkling with amusement at the photos. Chloe posing with a 1920s necklace, its plastic beads screaming "dollar store," the page flopping with just 200 followers, a petty victory Emily didn't need but enjoyed, a reminder that her sister's greed couldn't touch her world, a world where Aunt Margaret remained her anchor, the only family member who'd called after Thanksgiving, her voice warm over the phone. "So proud of you, kid." Always was her visit planned for next month, a promise of homemade apple pie and stories of the grandma Emily had never met, her hazel eyes softening at the thought, a flicker of the girl who'd once needed love, but now gave it to herself, a girl who'd grown into a woman who set boundaries, her weekly therapy sessions in a cozy Lincoln Park office, a new ritual, her hazel eyes meeting her therapist as she unpacked the pain of being the forgotten daughter, each session peeling back a layer, revealing a core of resilience that had always been there, a resilience that shone in her laughter now, a sound that filled her penthouse as she hosted dinners for her team, Lena's shy smile a constant, Edward Langston's gruff toast at the last one to Harper, who proved me wrong, a memory that warmed her, her hazel eyes reflecting a life no longer defined by absence, but by presence, the presence of people who saw her, valued her, chose her, a life where she walked the lakefront at sunrise, her steps light, her heart open, Her hazel eyes lifted to the horizon, a horizon that held no shadows of her past, only the promise of a future she'd write on her own terms. A future where she was whole, not because of her millions, not because of her family's silence, but because she'd chosen herself, a choice that had made all the difference, a choice that let her stand here, on this balcony, breathing in the lilacs, knowing she was finally, truly her home.